Catherine Gibson. Hi, how are you? Hi, Bintu Agne. Happy Monday. Marie Lauren Design. Hi. Josephine. Skyly3733. Hi. Aaron Chris. Hi, how are you? I hope I'm pronouncing all these names correctly. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. Dan Butner. Hi. Hi, where are you? Dan Butner. If you don't follow Dan Butner, please do. He's a great friend of mine. He started all the Blue Zone writing. We've done several stories together. So I love Dan Butner. Tiffany Belford, hi from Michigan. Hi, everybody. Hi from rainy LA. Well, actually, right now it stopped, but it poured rain this morning. I loved it. I love getting up super early and it's pouring rain. It's cozy. It's just a whole different thing for LA. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'm super, super excited to be talking about boundaries. Nedra Glover Tawwab. Nedra is a genius. She's really wise, really good. And this book, Set Boundaries, Find Peace, A Guide to Reclaiming Yourself. So I talk a lot about living a meaningful life. And I was raised to believe that a meaningful life came if you just gave all the time. You gave to different organizations, you gave to whoever needed your help. And that kind of leaves people pretty depleted. No one ever spoke to me about boundaries growing up. I actually never even heard the word, I have to say, till about kind of maybe 15 years ago. And someone started a conversation with me about boundaries. And I was like, boundaries? What are those? What are they? And so big Irish Catholic families, they didn't talk a lot about boundaries. Probably big Italian families, big families in general probably didn't talk a lot about boundaries, even though they should. Should have then, should now. It's a really good conversation, an empowering conversation to have, and really important to have it with direction. So have it with an expert before you have it with someone you're trying to establish boundaries with. So anyway, hi!
Hi!
Congratulations, Nedra!
Thank you. Thank you.
So exciting. I was just explaining your new book. It comes out tomorrow. I got it over the weekend, and I have been devouring it. I've dog-eared it all the way through. I've just written a lot about it. We could have a long conversation, but I'm so glad that you made time to hop on here to talk to all of us today. How are you feeling on the brink of a new book coming out?
I am so excited. I was just adjusting my volume. I'm so excited because the feedback so far has been so positive. And I was listening to you share your story about not knowing about boundaries, which I think is so common among everyone, because we learn actually not to have boundaries. Like you're doing this really bad thing for setting an expectation with people. So to be in the space to help people learn more about the importance of having boundaries, it's so exciting. So I can't wait for everybody to be able to get it.
So I think what's really great here is you say that this is a guide to reclaiming yourself. And you say setting boundaries actually enables you to find peace within. And so can you explain that? Because most people think peace within comes from spiritual practice. It comes from meditation. It comes from me managing my anxiety. So why does setting boundaries lead you to finding inner peace?
Yeah, so I would say that boundaries are a spiritual practice, because it is a way that you care for and nurture yourself. And the reclaiming yourself piece is really, I think we all have boundaries. We're just afraid to articulate them to other people. We're really afraid to hold the boundaries with other people. But I think we all have boundaries. You're a mom, I'm a mom. And I remember around that 2-year-old mark, kids start expressing their boundaries, right? No, I don't want to do that. Take this off of me. I don't, like all of these things.
Uh-huh.
And it's really up to the world around them to appreciate and maybe listen to the reasonable boundaries that they may have. But
Right.
in many cases, kids are told it's not okay for you to have these boundaries. You have to do what I say. And so we develop this people pleasing of, oh my gosh, if I don't do exactly what everyone is saying and wanting, I will not be loved. People will be upset at me. They'll be mad at me. And so we lose the boundaries, but they're in us. And so this book is really about reclaiming what you already know that you want.
That's so well. I love that you put it as a spiritual practice. You write in the book, Nedra, that so many people come to you with terrible anxiety and depression, and that what you actually discover underneath of that is that they just don't know how to implement boundaries. So explain the correlation, if you could, because we're seeing record cases of anxiety, right? What is the relationship between anxiety and boundaries?
Yeah, so anxiety is so much of therapy. That's the number one reason that people go to therapy. And in that, we start to talk about triggers. And a lot of the triggers, it's like, so you get really anxious when it's time to, oh, you get really anxious when your boss gives you more task on top of tasks without extending your hours. Oh, you get really, so all of these things, it was like, oh, okay, I hear that there are boundaries needed. It sounds like you're not enjoying these things. And I wonder in these spaces how you can create more limitations on how people are able to use your time. How can you create more expectations around what people can do in their relationships with you? And one thing about anxiety is when people are feeling really anxious, their mind goes to the worst case scenario.
Right.
So if you have to set a boundary, it's like, I can't do it because they're going to say blank. And it's this whole terrible story, right? Like if I set the boundary, they'll cut me off, they'll ghost me, they won't talk to me anymore. But typically when we set a boundary, people typically say, okay. Like there's so many people we have relationships with that have boundaries with us. And we just say,
yeah, you talk in the book about kind of the types of boundaries that exist, kind of rigid boundaries, porous boundaries, and then healthy boundaries. And that most people think of when they hear the word boundaries, they associate it with somebody telling them no, just no. But that's not really what boundaries are. So walk us through kind of how do you get from porous, right, which is like people walking all over your boundaries, to actually healthy. And a lot of people said, I need help with family, I need help with adult children. So how do you kind of implement healthy boundaries that work for you and people you love?
Absolutely. So porous boundaries, like you mentioned, they're weak boundaries, they're unhealthy boundaries. In those situations, you may have some codependency, enmeshment, or just people walking all over you or feeling like, oh my gosh, everyone's taking advantage of me. Rigid boundaries is when we've gone like super far with boundaries and we've put up these walls to keep people out. And so there is no vulnerability, there is no flexibility. It's just like, everyone is getting the same rule, no matter if the relationship is healthy or not. And it's really a way that people can see it as, I'm protecting myself. People can't, I won't let them violate a boundary. But, in different relationships, different boundaries are needed. And so holding everybody to the same standard of boundaries can sometimes create some unhealthy situations. And then with healthy boundaries, that's where we're able to say or at least actively implement the boundaries. So you mentioned family relationships and adult relationships with children. The hardest areas for most of us to set boundaries is with the family. And that's because we have roles. Like you have the role as little sister or oldest sister and mother, grandma, like people have an identity built for you around this role. And so if you've been doing something for a really long time and now you get to the point where I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be the, the vacation planner anymore.
Right, right,
Just saying something about that, it can be like tragic to everyone because you've done this for 15 years.
right,
And year
right,
16, you're like, I'm out of it. I want to go, but I don't want to plan, right? And
right. But
so just saying that sometimes is like, what will they think? And it is challenging to renegotiate that. But after the really hard time of setting it this time, you don't have to do it anymore. You just have to enforce it. So for the next vacation, you can say, well, I mentioned last time that I'm no longer doing vacations. What's another way for us to get this planned? Do we need a planner? Does somebody else want to take over? So after you do the boundary, is really about upholding the boundary after that point.
you write in here, which is what I think I want people to know is so good. You help people kind of map out how they can say what they want to say. Because so many people kind of, when you go to say what you want to say, you get nervous. You don't know how, you don't have the words. You don't want to offend people. You say that people often ask you like, well, I don't want to be guilty. I don't want to make people feel bad. And you said there are no boundaries without guilt, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that you really help people walk through, write down your boundary using the I statement. I need, I would like, I expect. Do not
Mm-hmm.
use the word because. These are all things, how do you share your boundary? Writing things down, practicing, and then being able to have the right words. How important is that?
So sometimes when we're setting a boundary, we will say it so much and we say so much instead of just having one sentence, we have a 4-page letter about what the boundary is. And at the end of it, we are talked out of the boundary because we've given so much information and backstory. And really, the boundary is the solution. So it's, I need blank. This is the solution to the issue that I'm having. It's not the problem. So as you're setting a boundary or placing a boundary with someone, you don't want to give a whole bunch of information, especially if you're not already practiced in setting boundaries, because people can talk you out of it because you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. And so then you say it and it's like, oh, wow. So you don't sound secure in this because you said, I need you to do this because it would make me feel this. And sometimes when we've said all of this stuff, when really what we need is when I share an issue with you, please don't give me any feedback. Just listen.
I love it here you said, because as I said, many people think, oh, boundaries are like, you can't come in here anymore. You can't do that. It's a forceful negative thing. But you have a suggestion in here where you say, I care so much about this relationship. I want to implement some guidelines, some boundaries around how we can make it better. I hadn't heard that before. And I thought that that was such a kind of positive way of framing something that for a lot of people is negative.
Yeah, I think previously boundaries has been labeled as telling people no,
Right.
shutting them out. And it is saying or what would help you function better in a relationship. And it's not just for you. It's for the health of the relationship. It's for both of you to be in a healthy relationship with each other, because you're not going to be the only person with boundaries. They have boundaries too. You may have a boundary of please show up on time, and their boundary may be please don't call me after 10 p.m. So it's a respecting of each other's boundaries. It's not that you're the only person showing up in the relationship with boundaries. It's that we have boundaries, and these parameters make our relationship healthy.
So you're trying to, and it seems to me in a very great way, taking the negativity out of boundaries and the discussion about it and making it, as you said, a practice, in a way, a spiritual practice and a positive thing for everybody that's involved in it, really.
Yeah, and I think it's, one of the ways that we know that we need boundaries in a relationship is based on how we feel during
Right.
those interactions. when we are in social events with people, when they text us, like what emotions come up. Like if you see a text from someone and your reaction is like, oh, well,
Yeah.
what's causing that sort of reaction and what can you do? Is there something in the relationship? Like perhaps this is the person who only texts you when they have a problem. And so perhaps saying something like, I noticed that you only text when you have an issue. Can you just text me like something happy? Like every day, just text me like a gratitude thing so we can mix it up a bit.
Right, but then someone's like, "Oh my God, they're going to get so offended if I say that," and I don't want to say that, and then you write, then resentment comes in, right? And so
Yeah.
being able to actually say your truth and having somebody accept it and go, "Oh, I didn't realize that I was doing that. Check, I'll send you something positive as well." You're saying that a lot of people don't realize what they're doing until it's brought up for them.
Absolutely. I think sometimes we do things like, if I blink a lot, I may not realize it, but someone looking at me could say, wow, you blink, more than the average person. Or, you tend to, be a little negative when you talk about this thing. Sometimes we don't notice that because we're not always in introspection mode. We're just, in a relationship and we're doing stuff. And it doesn't mean that the person is negative with everyone. It could be that they have a certain interaction pattern with you. And so just asking them to mix that up a bit can bring in some of those things that you really want to see in a relationship. So it's important to let people know, like, I love you so much and I do want to talk to you. That's why this thing is coming up. I want to talk to you and I want to feel excited when I see your phone call. I don't want to be upset by that. So, if we could just shift gears a bit in our dialogue together, I think it would be really helpful.
You talk also in the book about the kind of 6 areas that boundaries should be implemented in, right? There are
Mm-hmm.
sexual boundaries, there are financial boundaries, and then you also talk about exercises in here to help you implement those in every area of your life. Are you saying that that kind of being able to do that in every area of life will give you a peaceful life, will help you live what I always talk about, a meaningful life, will actually free you up to live the kind of life you want to live, to give back the way you want to give back?
Absolutely. Think of boundaries as structure. And so for these very areas of our life, we need structure. We can't live in a way where we don't even have self rules, right? Like a self rule could be brushing your teeth every day. Like it doesn't have to be this big thing of I will never eat. It could be that, but it could also be making sure that you are making time in your day for yourself. That could be a boundary to wake up and meditate for 20 minutes. That could be a self boundary. And so we do need boundaries in different areas of life. We need boundaries with social media and technology, with work, our friendships, romantic relationships, family, with ourselves. We need boundaries in all of these areas because they provide some sort of structure as to how to operate in these situations.
And Nedra, isn't it become more and more difficult with this 24-hour kind of work life that we're all in? Everybody's at home. Several of the questions that I looked at on my page were people saying, I'm getting paid from my job. I like my job, but now I'm kind of on my job 24 hours. I'm Zooming all the time. So how can I actually say to somebody to put a boundary up on that?
Mm. Well, the boundary in those work situations, sometimes it is us really implementing the boundary and not asking other people to do anything, but it's us leaving our phones in a room separate than where we are. It is us saying it's 5 o'clock. I will not look at the email anymore. It is us saying I'm not working on Saturday and Sunday. And if that is not respected, you can put a note in your email signature and say, hey, I do not work on weekends. I'll be back Monday at 8 o'clock. Or you can send people a message just to let them know for some accountability. I am trying to establish more of a break between work and home. And so these are the things that I'll be doing in order to be more efficient in both places, because what we know is, you know, scientifically, multitasking is not the best thing for us to do. Like, we waste a lot of time, like watching TV and working and, you know, like all of these things.
Yeah.
It's better to hone in on one thing and just to do that thing for some time and then do the other things. And so the work-life blend, depending on, you know, where you are in life, it could work. But when it is not working, think about those places that you want to place some boundaries.
I let several people here were like, yes, I'm definitely struggling in the, you know, workspace. My weekends are for me. I try not to work. That people have trouble kind of implementing these kinds of boundaries. The other places I said that a lot of questions were people saying, you know, my adult kids, I'm struggling to implement boundaries with adult kids. They ask me for money. They want to go here. They want to do this. They want to do that. How do you suggest implementing boundaries with adult kids?
Treating them as adults, because they are, the first part of that word is adult. And when you say kid, it makes me think of a kid. Right. And so you have adult children, right? Right. And so you have to allow them to be adults and place boundaries. You know, maybe there are times where you can, you know, give them like some bonus money or something like that, but you can set the parameters for that and say, you know, on Christmas, we will give you a large lump of sum of money, and this is it for the year. Or when you need help with your cell phone, we will not be helping you anymore every month. If there is an issue with your rent, I want you to utilize every resource before you come to me. You know, just thinking about these other things and really helping them to be more independent. And that may start with saying, hey, I noticed for 2 months in a row, you've come to me to ask me for help with rent. Have you thought about a part-time job? You know, take yourself out of the equation, because I think that's where that codependency starts to build when you're like, I am their only person. I am the only resource. And there are so many resources. And
there's
so
a woman
really,
here saying, I can't say no to my children. I just can't say it. Or other people saying, how do you set boundaries with in-laws? I mean, these are all, I mean, the good news is that I want all of you to understand that she goes through all of these things in her book. She goes through, you know, setting boundaries with your parents as the kid, parents setting boundaries with their adult offspring, boundaries in friendships, boundaries in work, boundaries with finances. She has an exercise in here, kind of what's on my plate, which I thought was really good. To kind of take a step back and think about what's actually on your plate. Don't people come to you and they don't even know what's on their plate?
Yeah, they don't even realize how many things they're doing for other people and the small amount of things they're doing for themselves, because we get into the spirit of, I have to help, I have to help, I have to do more. But how do we, especially with adult children, even with smaller children, what's age appropriate and what can they do? Are we being supportive, or are we enabling behaviors that a person can do on their own? And that person who said, I can't set boundaries with my kids, that is a mindset. And so now we have to talk about this idea that you think you can't when you can, because in some ways you are choosing not to, because you're making it such a thing that it's impossible. It's not impossible. You may not be ready. You may not know how. You may fear getting started, but you have the ability to set boundaries with your adult children. And all parents want their kids to be able to take care of themselves. And so our role is to really help them do that. It's almost like you're a teacher. When you get a kid in 3rd grade, they come in at a certain point, and by the end of the year, they should be at a different space. And so you have to train them to get there. And as parents, you have to train them to get there.
A lot of people saying I'm struggling with boundaries. Read this book, because this book goes through all of the for all of you who are saying, I'm struggling with in-laws, I'm struggling with kids. How do I say no? It's so hard. Yeah, it is hard. That's for sure. And she doesn't sugarcoat it. As you say in here, there's going to be guilt. So don't come to me and ask for no guilt. What I want to ask you also, Nedra, is like, as I said, I didn't grow up with any, I never even heard of boundaries. I never even heard of the word. And so is this a new thing, you know, or is it just, did it bypass all the big Irish Catholic homes, all the big Italian homes, all the big families, or is this, where did this come from actually?
I don't think it's a new thing, but I think it's something that's coming to the surface. We may have heard it just like a little tiny bit 20 years ago, just like little droplets of the word boundaries. And it was kind of like, what is that? You know? And then now it's like people are starting to understand, like, this is the piece that's missing in my relationships. Even with the mental health piece, with the anxiety and depression and how boundaries play into that. I've spoken to so many therapists who have said, oh my gosh, like, this is the thing that's been missing. We've been teaching people how to meditate. We've been teaching them how to identify their triggers. But how do we get rid of the trigger? Like, let's help people get rid of the trigger. Like, that's really a beautiful way to deal with the anxiety, because that, we can't get rid of all anxiety, but that's a piece of it that we can manage. The relationships that's causing anxiety, that's where we can hop in and say, oh, I can manipulate this trigger a bit and maybe not feel as anxious in this situation.
Do you think this is also because we now have kind of, you know, no boundaries in a way with how we live? You talked about boundaries being structured. So people are in their homes and they're living on social media and they're working 24/7 and everything is just fluid, right? It's just all over. You know, when I was growing up, you know, it was really structured, you know, and also when you went to work, you went in a structured job, you worked your way up. Now everybody's like a year here, over here. You know, relationships are really all over the place. The way people are living, people are spending their time, more time communicating in social media and less time knowing how to communicate with a real live other person. Is it the timing of where we are in our world?
You know, I think that boundaries existed, but we didn't call them that. I remember my grandmother having plastic on her furniture, which I consider a boundary. It's like, don't mess my sofa up. My grandfather, he has had the same carpet for 30 years. It's white carpet. And as soon as you walk in the house, you have to take your shoes off. It's the rule. Take your shoes off. There's white carpet here. So I consider that a boundary. And that's, you know, that's been around a really long time and everybody respects it. If I take anybody to my grandparents' house, I'm like, take your shoes off. You know, it's like I walk in with their boundary on my mind. So it's one of those things that I think that we've been engaging in boundaries work, and now we have a term for it and we know how to apply it.
So that used to be kind of respect or rules. And it's a new word, and also kind of you're viewing it as a spiritual practice, as a self kind of not improvement, but a self-love in a way. That if you have boundaries, you teach people how you want to be treated in all these areas of your life.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times people think, oh my gosh, boundaries are so mean. Like, you can't tell people how to treat you. And it's often coming from a person who is being mean to you, and you're concerned about being mean to them by saying, hey, please stop being mean to me. Like it's not one of these things where you're setting boundaries always in these situations with very gentle, delicate people. You're setting them with people who also have boundaries with you. And so they're already empowered. So just take a little bit of that and be courageous enough to repeat your boundaries to them.
And you talk about doing it in very small ways in the beginning. I love your suggestion in there, like even a small way of, like, if someone mispronounces your name, or if if you're in a restaurant and the food comes and it's
Mm-hmm.
not what you ordered. I've always noticed, like, my son will say, like, oh, this isn't what I ordered. I'm always like, oh, I don't know. I'll just take whatever they give me. It's also, maybe it's a generational thing or whatever, but that just gave me the strength to go, oh, I actually could say, this
Mm-hmm.
isn't what I ordered without being rude. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think many people, you have written about confusing, trying to be nice with also having some self-respect, and like, this is not what I ordered and I'm not paying for this, but how you say it is what's important.
Yeah, how you say it is very important. And it's not yelling, it's not screaming, it's not having some body language that displays that you're upset, but doing it in a very gentle way. And again, a simple sentence. I think when we say too much, it gives more of an opportunity for to be an issue in the wording. So just saying something as simple as, oh, this is not what I order. Can I have blank instead?
What is your hope for this book? I mean, it's super exciting. It's your first book. You have this huge Instagram audience. You've written for the Sunday paper. Thank you so much, which we love.
Yes.
And what is your kind of, if you close your eyes on the brink of your book launch, what is your hope for this book?
I hope that the people who need it have a copy to read, because there are so many issues in our lives that we think are external. And I wonder if we had the internal compass to really own and implement some of these boundaries, would we feel better? I think we would. I think we would. In my years of being a therapist, this is my 14th year. I have helped people just reclaim their voice, just be able to say to someone, I don't want to go to your party. And seeing like literally a physical difference from them empowering themselves to say, I don't want to go to the party. Like, that seems like such a simple thing, but we commit to so many things we don't want to do.
Yeah.
And it causes so many internal issues because we're unable to voice this. And so understanding that you can speak up, it's okay, and it's reasonable. It's just such an empowering process. And so for this book, I hope that people read it and they feel a bit more empowered to set boundaries. And I want it to be something that you come back to, because it's a practice. It's a lifelong practice to set boundaries. It's not something that you do today and you're done. I was on a podcast last week and they said, how did you get so good at setting boundaries? Like, you have no more boundaries. I'm like, I actually set a boundary today. Like, I set a boundary with someone today. So it's not that you get to this space is no more boundaries. As we shift, so will the boundaries. In the pandemic, we've had to have new boundaries. We have to have new boundaries while working from home. So as things shift, our boundaries will shift and we'll have to continue to implement them.
And this is beautiful, because I think this is coming at such a perfect time, because I talk to so many people who are anxious, nervous, unsure about how to re-enter, or if they want to re-enter, how to restructure their lives post-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Do they need to? Do they need to go to the office? How do they say that? How do they take parts of the pandemic that worked for them and then meld their lives back in? But ultimately, I think what you're really saying is that people have to speak their truth. Tell people. You talk a lot in here about people can't mind read how you want to be treated or what you're thinking. So giving voice to your voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially, I'm happy you brought up the pandemic, because that's an interesting place to be, where we can now say, you know, I've been working from home for a year and I would prefer to continue to do that in whatever capacity possible. So if it's 4 days a week, that is now my preference because I realize I'm super productive being at home or whatever it is, or I just prefer not leaving my home. So being able to say that, the more that we speak about that, I think the better it will be, because that's probably what a lot of folks are thinking, or at least a lot of people in your office, on your team. If we're feeling a way about these things, it's okay to voice them. And sometimes people may disagree with your boundary. I mean, you could say that to someone and they say, no, you're mandated to come, but at least you tried. At least.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, because there are people on both sides, as you said, of the boundary. So you may be saying to your boss, I don't want to come, and the boss is like, I need you. But then that's what's called a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, you start the conversation.
And then learning, I love what you say about learning to look at this as a practice, learning to look at your life, learning how to check your tone, but also look at this as a way of empowering your voice. We talk a lot about this is how you want to live, this is how you want to be treated, and that evolves and changes as you do, correct?
Absolutely. I think my boundaries before becoming a parent are different than my boundaries when I became a parent. One thing I noticed was, I didn't have as much time as I used to. And so after I became a parent, because I don't know when my kids are going to wake up. So I have to go to bed. So my boundaries shifted. And I think the people in my life, they have to understand that, I'm showing up in a different way because this is what's required right now of me. And it may change, as things progress. I may, stay up later. I don't know, but I'm entitled to change in whatever ways that I need to. And especially if those ways do not harm other people. No one is being harmed in the process of me setting this boundary, right?
There's Avery here saying, I'm an adult. How do I set boundaries with my mother? There were a lot of those questions also on my Instagram, where they were about adult kids, they were about working from home, and they were from adult people about their parents, about their mothers, calling them and treating them like kids. Mm-hmm. Her answers are in this book, but let's
yes. So one of the things that parents will do, as long as you act like a kid, they'll treat you like a kid. And so in relationships with family, you have to reestablish the role. If you're an adult, allow yourself to be an adult with your parents. So even if they say, I'll wash your clothes for you, no, I will do it. Like whatever those behaviors are that's making them treat you like a child, you have to establish yourself as an adult. And sometimes we just fall right into the role of being, little 16-year-old Nedra when you see your parents, and it's like, no, you're an adult. This is your house. These are your kids, and you have to own it as such, particularly when you want someone to treat you a certain way. And so some of that is going to be you shifting your behaviors to be more in line with the adult role that you want them to respect.
So I want to thank, because I know you're super busy and people are asking me all these questions. I want to just reiterate, Nedra answers all of these questions that you're asking me in this book. And the book is available pre-order. It comes out tomorrow. A lot of people on here saying, I can't implement boundaries with my in-laws. I can't do it with my mother or my father because they live alone and they are my mother or my father. I can't. And I think what she has said here, and she says in the book, that's a mindset. That's the can't mindset. The shoulda, woulda, coulda, can't mindset is something that's within our power. It's within our control. And it's not, I think, as she has said throughout, it's not about saying, I will never help you. I will never call you. I will never do these things. But it's about having some guidelines. So sometimes you can give more. So sometimes you can do better. It's providing structure and helping you so that you don't resent your mother, your father, or all of these things. The book title is Set Boundaries. Yes, thank you. People asking, I have it upside down. Set Boundaries, Find Peace, A Guide to Reclaiming Yourself. And there are ways to set boundaries in a loving way, not in a harsh cutoff way, kind of, although you do say sometimes that's also necessary, but that you can do this in a way where you feel good and it improves your relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nedra. Thank you so much. I know you have boundaries. You have work to do. You have things. So I want to thank you. Wish you good luck with the book. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be a big success. And most important, I think it's going to really help people.
Thank you. Thank you. That's my hope.
There you go. Mine too. So we're aligned. Thank you so much. And we're going to put this up in the midweek in the Sunday paper on Wednesday to help people think about this, initiate this conversation with your adult offspring, with your young children, with your friends, with your coworkers. A lot of really great material in here. So thank you, Nedra. Go do whatever you have to do.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. I'm going to. Okay, we want to thank her so much. I want to reiterate once again, the book is Set Boundaries, Find Peace, A Guide to Reclaiming Yourself. I often talk about living, as I said, a meaningful life, a life in which you can make a difference for those you love and also in the world, but you can only do that if you have structure, if you have a practice, if you are coming from a place of being filled up, not a place of being wiped out. And I think this was her ideas in here, her examples, her advice is really, really helpful, especially to those of us who grew up without boundaries. I learned a lot from reading this book, and I learned a lot from her advice. And so I hope all of you did as well. It's Monday. I hope you have a great week. I know a lot of people anxious about re-entering. Remember, use your voice, go at your own pace. And create the life that you want to live, a life that is meaningful, inspirational, and that gives back. Thanks so much for joining us.